welcome to the show.
And welcome into the Astros Future Podcast here on the Believe Podcast Network, new network. Same host here for you. I'm Jimmy Price, Astros Future. You can find my work, astrosfuture.com, and you know where to find me on X at Astros Future.
And I'm Kenny Van Doren, your co-host. You can find me on X at the Vandalorian.
So it's been a little while since Kenny and I have got on here and recorded, partially due to some network stuff we were working out. But like I said, new to the Believe Podcast Network, so you'll be hearing us there now instead of the old one we were with. But there's a lot we got to catch up on, Kenny. There's a lot that happened, and I know we just started spring training, so off-season recap kind of feels like something we don't have to do. But I feel like we got to share our thoughts on some of these moves. So first, I want to start on the big move of winter. Kyle Tucker traded it to the Cubs. They got back Isak Paredes, Hayden Wesneski, and Cam Smith. So we'll dive into a little bit of the stats, Kenny. But let me just get your initial thoughts on that move.
Yeah, it was a little bit surprising. Not a brag at all. I was in Hawaii when it happened, first time on the island. And now, Jimmy, you were blowing up my phone. I was like, I didn't have service, got back off of a boat, and you are just like spamming me with texts. Had no idea what was happening. I thought about posting just like a photo of the ocean and saying like, hey, Cam Smith hits the ball hard, but he puts it on the ground maybe a little bit too much. And that's maybe something that you can talk about just with the worry about Cam Smith is improving that ground ball rate, pulling the ball a little bit more in the air is something that you want to see. But it was a trade that just felt like it was going to happen over time. The more that there was talk about it, the more that the Astros were opening up to media members and sourcing different parts of those, beat writers that are more familiar with the major league roster of the Astros. You knew something was going to happen. I thought it was a very strong return for the Astros. Wesneski is a guy who actually caught some flack on Twitter not too long ago for rooting on the Texans against the Bears. So he definitely fits that mold of an Astros pitcher and just a hometown kid. You got Spencer Aggetti, who's in a similar boat as him. Wesneski struggled the past 2 years, though. You look at it in the 2024 year, 3.86 ERA, but he did show flashes when they got him from the Yankees in a trade a couple years ago. And there was kind of a cement mixer in one of those secondary pitches, and maybe that's not going to be the best for against some righties that might be looking to get into the Crawford boxes. But when you get a guy that has experience as a long relief, but also as a starter, and will be vying for a starting position, it's just what Dana Brown is always wanting, just with those pitchers. So there's kind of my just initial thoughts coming off of it. But I feel like Isaac Paredes is probably one of the biggest ones you want to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot there that he's kind of an unknown, right? I mean, I know at the deadline last year there was a lot of rumors about the Astros being interested in him, and he came off a great 2023 season, 31 homers, 130 OPS plus. And last year, prior to the trade to Chicago, 16 homers, 127 OPS plus. Then he went to Chicago and his numbers kind of tanked. And I don't know if that had to do with Wrigley Field or what exactly it was. But overall, you're getting a guy who's had two really good seasons back to back. Offensive production is probably at the level of Bregman or potentially even a little bit better. And he's got 3 years team control left. So, yeah, that's a great move to get a guy back like Paredes, to get a major league player like that back. And I know we want like these insane returns for our top guys like Kyle Tucker, but you're talking 1 year of Kyle Tucker and you're going to get 3 years of Paredes, 5 years of Wesneski. And then we obviously haven't even really talked about Cam Smith yet, which is now the Astros top prospect, 14th overall pick last year. And I said it on a podcast a couple of days ago, but the big deal, like for me, what I saw with Smith initially is like, we see a lot of guys like top tier, top 5 picks come in and struggle right away. And man, he did the exact opposite. The Cubs were aggressive with him, got him all the way up to Double-A, 7 homers, hit over 332 games. And I think it's Charlie Condon. Is that how you say his name?
Charlie
from
Condon.
Georgia. But, he struggled mightily, early on after the draft. So to see a guy like Smith come in and do that, and I think it was important, like he did, he's a huge guy, right? 6'3", 225, big power, but he didn't strike out a ton. He drew some walks. I mean, just look like the numbers he posted last year in his limited time was very, very encouraging. And I do think it's interesting. There's a Baseball Prospectus put out their top 101, and they had him as the number 20 prospect in baseball, which, I mean, that's up there. I think the last time we had a prospect that high was Pena going into the 22 season. They had him somewhere around 15 to 20. But to get a guy like Smith in that deal, on top of major league players that have team control, and get a prospect like Smith is very, very intriguing. And then the fact that they're kind of moving him around, right? In winter camp, they had him in right field. I think he's going to play both a little bit of third and right. And I think for him, it's just a matter of finding a place that his bat can play. He's a good athlete. So I'm sure if he moved out to outfield, he would be really good there. But I'm excited about the trade. I think Paredes is a good pickup. And like you mentioned with Wesneski, that's the fifth starter is wide open. It could be him. It could be Gusto. It could be Blue Ball. We'll find out. But I think they did well in the return. Hurts to lose a guy like Tucker, but I do think that was a good return.
It's interesting too, just with Cam Smith. I mentioned that there are some, worries about the ground ball rate. He hits the ball hard. He's
Yeah,
gotten 60 or 50 grade power plus, just depending on where you're looking, and it's just him getting the ball in the air. I read somewhere that maybe you cap it at maybe 20 home runs a season, just with just needs to work a little bit more on that pull power. But he is a very skilled hitter, and when you can kind of tie that in with a guy that size, and he's just that athletic enough to be a good fielder as well at the hot corner is definitely good. He wants to keep that speed up. He's not going to be a guy that steals a ton of bases, but if he can still move at that size, he'll stick at third base. And I think that's something that the Astros really were looking at, especially when you have someone under control like Isaac Paredes for 3 seasons. You get Cam Smith up to speed pretty quickly, likely going to start the year in Double A with Corpus Christi after being in big league camp. Then maybe you have your third baseman of the future. If not, if the speed doesn't really stick, maybe he does fall into the outfield, like you were talking about, putting him in right, because he has good arm strength. I think that's probably his highest graded tool when you look at whoever you want to look at for those tool grades. But I'm also just looking at this size, Jimmy, and we've seen like so many pictures, and I always love when the beat writers who spend a little bit more time in the major leagues don't
yeah,
get to see these guys. Of course, I mean, none of them got to see Cam Smith. He was in the Cubs system,
right.
but you just see them like amazed by the size of this guy. I think
Yeah,
he might be bigger than 6'3", 224. And baseball players lie about their size. He might be selling himself a little short.
yeah. I mean, we know some baseball players that we've had on here that maybe exaggerated their height a little bit. Quincy Hamilton, shout out to him for what he did last spring. But yeah, it's funny when Smith was on with Matt Thomas. I think it was earlier this week. It's Matt Thomas mentioned him and Cam Smith and Zach DeZenzo potentially playing defensive end for the Texans because those guys are like that big. I mean, Smith is 6'3", 225, but probably weighs more than 225 actually. But
Mhm.
yeah, seeing Chandler Rome and McTaggart kind of highlight how big these guys are. And then to go along with the he's big, and then Daniel Brown says he could be an aircraft carrier. So I immediately he's talking in terms of carrying the team, but I immediately think of him. That's how huge he is. He's an aircraft carrier. But yeah, no, I'm excited about that trade. I think it hurts to lose an MVP player like Tucker, but I think they got a really good return. But while we're on the topic of of outfield, specifically right field, probably 6 months ago, we had no thought that left field would be as intriguing as it is going into the 2025 season. But then we get the news that Jose Altuve is going to play some left field. And initially it was because he was opening the door to allow us to maybe sign Bregman back. But now it just looks like it's a full on thing that's going to happen. He struggled a little bit defensively last year. He's kind of been on a decline. And now he's going to be out in outfield, which is just crazy to think. But if he can hit and he can play, league average defense, you're probably a better team with him playing out there than him playing at second base.
I really liked this breakdown I saw on MLB Network. I believe it was last night or in the last couple of days with Brian Kenny talking about how you have guys they play it's easy to say second base, left field are two of the easier positions to play in baseball, especially just left field at Minute Maid Park, and that's half of your season playing
Yep.
in a field that's is a short portion left, and you don't really want to give up those spots to guys. You want to keep people staples into those positions, and
Right.
especially when you have consistent hitters like Jose Altuve and Jordan Alvarez at those positions respectively. You don't really want to have to move them around. But with Jose Altuve, playing or possibly playing more in the outfield this year, I think the big conversation is like who's going to play second? Is Brendan Rodgers, Mauricio Dubon going to play this? I'm thinking more about how this kind of affects the bench moving forward as well, and what prospects and what minor leaguers are really going to get an opportunity. Because if you have a guy like Jose Altuve playing in left field, maybe you look more to an outfielder just in that top of the system. Jacob Melton, of course, battling kind of like a small hiccup right now in camp and isn't going to be
Yeah.
playing right off the bat. But does this open the door for another outfielder? Because I mean, you're probably going to fluctuate Jose Altuve into that DH spot, left field, second base. I mean, in your mind, who in that that crop of guys that are just right on the bubble? You'll maybe throw in Shea Whitcomb, Zach DeZenzo, with Zach playing a lot more outfield and Shea playing a little bit in the minors, but really not. That's not really where he's going to end up long term. I mean, what does that in your mind kind of affect it, Jimmy?
Yeah, that was kind of my thought is, you got a guy like Wickham who probably appears to be a better infielder than outfielder. And then DeZenzo played left field today in that spring training game. So I think either one of those guys are have a good chance to make the major league roster, and then potentially back up because Dumont is your utility guy, but if he ends up being your starter at second, Altuve's in left, then you're right. There we could see, especially late in games, maybe them going to guys that are a little bit better, a little bit faster, a little more range out there next to Jake Myers, maybe McCormick. But DeZenzo, maybe if they're looking for the outfield, Shea Wickham, maybe if they're looking for a little bit more on the infield, which I mean they're going to have to, right? If Dumont's starting and you have Paredes at third and Pena at short, you're going to have somebody back there that can be their backup. So it's kind of opens that door for Shea Wickham, which will be nice for him. I mean, he's kind of earned it at this point through his couple years that he's had in AAA or really AA, AAA last 2 years. But it's going to be interesting. They have Ben Gamble, like you mentioned, Brendan Rodgers, another one that they brought in. Well, I feel like this is the first time and really in a while that we've had like huge question marks at who's going to play this position at multiple positions for the Astros, like in spring training. But it's fun when you have like a few prospects that are like right there with the DeZenzo and the Wickham and the Melton, the guys that are ready probably for a major league opportunity, and now they get to fight for it.
It's even like when you bring that up, Jimmy, yeah, it definitely is like one of the more like head scratching years of roster construction of like who's going to play what. But it's
Mhm.
also an offseason that the Astros got fairly busy. I mean, we talk about that
Yeah,
trade, adding Christian Walker, now being linked again back to Nolan Arenado, according to those reports from Emily.com. And it's just still, you try to like build out a roster, what you think is going to happen. You're not going to be right now, and it's one of the funniest things to think about because the last time there's probably something like that might have been the 2020 season, just because of how much that roster flipped over after just kind of a weird off season and the sign
right.
stealing scandal and just nothing really kind of panning out, and then you had the pandemic as well. But before that, maybe 2017, 2016. It's just
Yeah.
one of those weird years that they're trying to keep the window open as much as they can, but this roster just looks completely different from last year in terms of who are going to be those extra contributors.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up Christian Walker. Astros signed him to that 3-year deal. I believe it's 3 years, and he's kind of an underrated player, probably in terms of the big picture here. But really good defender at first base. Obviously, he's had some really good production offensively. I think he's averaged 32 homers over the last 3 years. OPS plus of 123. And it's important, I think, to look at where the Astros were at first base last year, which was like dead last in wins above replacement and weighted runs created plus, and where they're going to be at this year. I mean, you're talking a huge upgrade from the Abreu and Singleton to now the Christian Walker, both offensively and defensively. And he's projected to continue those numbers. I mean, I know it's a projection, and we're talking Fangraphs projection. That's not always going to be right, but they're projecting for 30 plus homers again, OP or a weighted runs created plus of over 120. I think that's a huge signing for the Astros when you look at improving the defense there. I mean, we saw Yuli for years and how good he was at preventing guys from getting errors. And I think getting a Gold Glover like Walker, especially with having some of the issues that maybe Pena had last year throwing the ball, I think that's going to be huge. But it's almost like that's kind of the forgotten move at this point. It felt like it was so early in the offseason when the Astros signed Christian Walker, and so much has happened with Tucker and Altuve at left field, and then Bregman signing with Boston, that I kind of think people are maybe sleeping on the kind of impact that he can have.
Most certainly. And, maybe a guy too is, reaching that mid-30 mark where maybe you'll see a dip offensively. But when you just
Yeah.
have, gold glove defense, gold glove caliber defense at first base, that is a plus. And he is a right-handed hitter. I think that's what they had to go after at that first base position, to just kind of stick with what works well just on the pull side for a guy like Christian Walker, who has high exit velocities. And can pull the ball in the air. So
Yeah.
definitely, a good guy to kind of hold down that position, because when you look at it as well, not a lot of teams are just drafting pure first baseman. You'll run into a guy like Jack Caglione, who, unicorn. He pitches too, but he's probably going to be a primary first baseman DH as a position player. But you're not really drafting these first basemen. That's why the
Right.
Astros don't really have one in that top group. Maybe Zach DeZenzo will probably end up there. I don't know if he has the defensive stretch anymore to play third base or stick on the left side of the infield. So hold down that position and see if there's a guy within the system that maybe doesn't stick at catcher, maybe doesn't stick in the outfield and has to move to first base down the line. And that's where your replacement comes in the next couple of years.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, good stopgap type thing. It's not like they're signing him this huge deal, but good move. But speaking of huge deals and infielders, Alex Bregman goes to Boston. So we got to hit on that real quick. I know it's probably been beat a lot through a whole bunch of other people, but we haven't shared our thoughts. And losing a guy like Bregman is tough. I mean, we saw he's been with us for a long time. Drafted in 2015, debuted in 16. Won 2 World Series. We saw what he did offensively. We saw what kind of leader he was. But ultimately, the Astros had to make the decision that they felt was best when it came to the finances, and they didn't want to give him that huge annual contract, but also the year. So sucks to lose a guy like that, but it's a little more comforting when you bring in a guy like Paredes, which once again I feel like is a little underrated. I think if Bregman has the name, he has the draft status, he has the 2 World Series champions, he got the Gold Glove, the All-Star appearances. Paredes doesn't have any of that, but if you look at their performance the last 2 years, they're pretty much equal in terms of home runs, OPS plus, and Paredes may even have a little bit of an edge. And if you look at projections, just given their age, Paredes is projected to be quite a bit better next year than Bregman. Now, will Bregman be rejuvenated going to Boston and playing in Fenway Park? Potentially, he has like insane career numbers there. But I think we're going to be all right at third base with a guy like Paredes. And then, I mean, like you mentioned, the rumor about Nolan Arenado, if you brought him in and then Paredes moved to second. But yeah, sucks to lose a guy like Bregman. But I mean, it's baseball. We've been through it now. We lost Correa, we lost Springer, we lost Garrett Cole. It feels like this is just another year for Astros fans losing a star.
It's just the Astros. I think they're losing more of the intangibles than the overall production. You hit it on the head right there, comparing him and Paredes over these last couple of years, and what the projections say, kind of moving forward on very similar lines with Paredes. You're having that edge offensively, and I think that's just really what you're losing is these other things. And you're going to have fans, they'll be in our replies and saying, it shows the money. I mean, that's what anyone would do. It's just, how it goes. And he doesn't really owe you anything more. He was kind of on a discounted deal there for a couple of years with getting his RBers bought out, but still was that turning point just in the Astros farm system as well. When you think about where the Astros went after being one of the worst teams in baseball and really just overhauling everything they did, those years that they were losing led to Alex Bregman. It led to them drafting a pitcher at number 1 and then realizing they weren't going to sign him and then getting Kyle Tucker. So it's just those years, and you see those guys go in the same offseason. It is a different feeling, I bet, for a lot of Astros fans, but it kind of just opens the door to a new chapter of what this kind of system will look like in terms of where this production will come from, because a lot of the guys on this team now that are going to be your big offensive players were acquired, from the outside. So it is going to be kind of a new kind of look for what the Astros have been doing over the last couple of years.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think they've set themselves up well offensively to kind of to have some success. I think people are going to sleep on them a little bit, understandably. I mean, you lost Bregman, you lost Tucker, you have all the injuries still on the pitching staff, but I think they've set themselves up to do well offensively. But that's enough about the off season. Let's get to what we're doing right now. That's spring training. So the Astros are in spring training. They've done their invites, the 40-man roster. So Kenny and I had a thought. Well, actually, I shouldn't say Kenny. It was Kenny's thoughts. He wanted to do it. He wanted to do a draft style of prospects that we're looking forward to seeing. We're excited to watch in spring training. But just to throw this out there, I have no idea who he's selecting. So I got my picks, and I don't know. I guess we'll do snake draft just to make it fair. We'll do snake. But I got my picks. We'll do 4 each. And I don't know who he's picking. So I got my list, but I'm going to have to mark some guys off. There's no trades allowed, no future picks, nothing like that. So, Kenny, do you want to go with the first pick, or you want me to go?
Well, if anyone's looking at my eyes, I'm looking at another screen right now, and I did a wheel, and Jimmy won the wheel. So that means, Jimmy, you can go first, or you can just pass up on that first pick. It's up to you.
I'll go first. So I got to play our music though to get us ready. So here we go. With the first pick in the 2024 Prospects to Monitor and Spring Training Draft,
25.
I'm taking none other than Cam Smith. Got to do it. I know that's the obvious one. I'm sorry to do it to all the guys that have been in the Astro system for a long time, but when you trade a star like Kyle Tucker and you bring in a prospect of Cam Smith's caliber, number 20 on Baseball Prospectus list, he's a top prospect, like for sure in the Astro system on MLB Pipeline, BP, Baseball America, Fangraphs, all of them. But big time prospect, big time bat, and I think what we've seen with Dana Brown in the last few years is he is not afraid to move people. If they show like any signs of success, he's ready to move them up. So I think there's going to be a really good chance this year that Cam Smith even makes his debut this year. I don't know if it's going to be at third, if it's going to be right field, if it's going to be DH, but I think he's going to have an opportunity to get in to get in the major league club, be with the major league club this season, and have an immediate impact, and show why he was so highly touted in the draft and why the Astros coveted him in this Kyle Tucker trade.
Yeah, that's your middle name's Chalk, Jimmy, isn't it? Yeah, just the Chalk pick from Jimmy Price.
Easy. That was an easy one. All right, Kenny, you ready? All right, here we
Yep.
go.
With the second pick in the 2025 spring training draft on prospects that we want to keep our eyes on, this is a layup. Bryce Matthews. I think this one was kind of an easy one. It just had to be number 2, and I think it might be some recency bias just for myself. Seeing that double they ripped off the wall down there in Game 1 in Port St. Lucie, looking like he's coming in with a strong bat, and you can't get overly hyped over what you're seeing in some of these spring training games. But that was a good first start for him, just offensively, to see that going. And there's been holes in his swing before, a little bit of swing and miss issues, moving pretty quickly up to AAA last year. After starting the year at high A, you kind of thinking like you just mentioned, Dana Brown's not afraid to move these guys. He's had the back issues in the past, and coming into spring training and getting right off the bat with that kind of exit velocity is just what you want to see. Playing some second base too, so moving around the infield, letting him kind of find a feel and see where that future holds. Possibly at second base, if Jeremy Pena sticks around. But you like those athletic shortstops.
Yep.
Maybe he does move to the outfield at some point and really stretches that defensive versatility. So he's my second
that could
guy.
be a extremely exciting infield when you think about like Cam Smith, Jeremy Pena, and Bryce Matthews. So that's a good one. He was on my list. He was obviously on my list of 8 or 9 that I have here, but went ahead and stole that one. So all right, here we go.
With the second pick, maybe a little bit of recency bias too, just because I got to see him pitch for the first time in a while since he was in AAA. Ryan Gusto, he's definitely flying under the radar. Probably going to crack some top 30s here soon with a lot of these updates that are coming out, especially for you, Jimmy. I think you've had him in there already recently. So I think a lot of other people have taken notice of what he's done. I had some people confused why it said that he was brought up for his major league debut last year, but didn't pitch. And the weather didn't want him to pitch, didn't want him to get his major league debut there in the last game of the season against Cleveland, but comes out, pitches the first game of spring training. I wonder if that was a little bit intentional just to kind of make up for it, get him on the field. But he is on the 40-man roster, so he's the first guy we've taken that's not a non-roster invitee, but practically one. I mean, he hasn't had a chance to even touch a major league mound yet, but he's been in that dugout for a couple of times. Very humble guy, has been on the show with us. I kind of wanted to pick his brain just a little bit more, get him to talk, a little bit more just about how dominant he was last year. If you subtract those first 2 starts in AAA, he might be in the conversation for PCL pitcher of the year. He was just that good for the Space Cowboys and at AAA, and everything was going well for him. Added that sweeper in 2023, and just the whole arsenal was there. And I think even Julian Morales talked to him, was there some like Hunter Brown-esque stuff going on, because they just come to him and add something to that arsenal, and it just works. And he's very methodical. I think a lot of people should be excited just about the pitcher that Ryan Gusto is, not just necessarily the results, but he's a guy that's very intellectual just about the whole pitching job.
For sure. And it's crazy to think he was a 2019 draft pick, right? It's like 6 years ago. Draft pick 6 years ago. He's going to make his debut this year, no doubt. Barring injury, he's going to get an opportunity, and we saw it in spring what he can do. So that would have been my next one if you didn't steal it. But I got my next one ready. Here we go. In the prospects to monitor in spring 2024 spring training, I'm going with another pitcher, AJ Blueball. He was the Astros feature representative last year. Pitched in AAA he made 1 start in AA. Got moved up, pitched in AAA, 3.83 ERA in AAA last year. The Astros are going to need help at the 5th starter. I know we talked about Wesneski, who I think can be the guy, but he's never really pitched that many innings. And when you look at the amount of starts that we're going to need out of the 5th starter, and then just the injuries that are going to be there, I think we're going to need Blue Ball to step up. And we saw what he did last year in AAA, and he was part of that 3-headed monster with Gusto and with Colton Gordon. Help him carry him to that PCL title, AAA title. So very excited to see what he can do. And I feel like he's just kind of him and Gusto are like that. They have it. Neither one are very, they're kind of quiet. They're humble. They go out there, they just do their job, and I think innings eaters, man, that's kind of what I see on those guys. Like they're going to be able to go out there and eat some innings for you. And when I say that, I don't mean that as a negative that they're not going to pitch well. But yeah, I'm super excited about his opportunity he's going to get this year. Because I think we'll see both of them up with the big league roster at some point in 2020. All right, here we go. Snake draft. So I'm next. Here we go. All right, with the fifth pick here in the prospects to monitor draft for 2025, I kind of went back and forth a little bit here, and but I'm going to go with my pick, Jacob Melton, outfielder. It's probably an obvious one, and on maybe if the back injury wasn't there, maybe even be a little bit higher. Hopefully, he's healthy and can get his opportunity because there, like we said earlier in the podcast, there's an opportunity for a lot of these guys, and there's a clear opportunity for Melton. You know, he's the Astros' top prospect for multiple years in a row, has ridiculous power, has really good athleticism, really good speed. We saw him make some great plays in AAA. I think he had a ridiculous catch in center field when we were there for the PCL title game. Great athlete, and I think they're trying Altuve in left, but I don't think they're sold on that idea necessarily, or even McCormick and Wright. I mean, if Melton can come in and spring and hit, he's going to get an opportunity very early on, and I think it's just a matter of him showing what he can do with the bat. It feels like it takes him a little while to get going, but hopefully he can get healthy, get in spring, get some games going, get the bat going, and get an opportunity sooner rather than later.
Yeah, there's a reason they kept him. You look at some of the trades they've had over the last couple of years. You got rid of Gilbert.
Yep.
You moved Clifford in that same trade back in 2023. They kept him because you look at some of these rankings, he might have been behind Clifford, behind Gilbert. He was the one guy that wasn't really in the top 100 yet, but got in there after that. So really just came down to, this guy maybe ranks a little bit higher on that internal list. I doubt they have like a list of all the guys in the minor leagues they have ranked, but there's guys in there that they believe that they look at those tools and they can see that this guy's gonna have an opportunity. And you talk about that, maybe the power's been a little bit diminished too, really cleaned up that swing a little bit. He's mentioned before where, just it looks a little bit awkward, but it works for him. So I think it's one of those things where he needs to turn a lot of those hard hit balls back into like some power shots to right field when he pulls fly balls. And I think you're kind of looking at that Jacob Melton that destroyed the Pac-12 before he was drafted by Houston back in 2022.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned the moving him up in the rankings, internal rankings. And when you say that, I just think about like Dana Brown, maybe in his office, and he's got like all the names on the wall, and like, guy goes 0 for 4, 4 strikeouts, and he just slides the tag off and moves it down a couple notches, and it's constantly moving. But I'm sure they use something other than a wall. But anyways, all right. So Kenny, you got two more picks, and I'll finish off with the last one. So I think we are at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, pick 6, right? So here we go, pick 6.
With the sixth pick, man, I'm sure when you're supposed to come up to these podiums, you're already supposed to have your mind made
cards
up.
in.
I'm going to save a guy. I'm going to save some money. I'm going to save him for my next pick because I know you won't take him. Well, I guess I'm also going in order. I'm going to take Miguel Yola. I think that's probably a good one to take here. Yeah. I'm a little bit higher on him than maybe some other people are. Just I think the ERA was maybe a little bit worrisome. Still allowed a good amount of runs. The opponent batting average being under 200 and the strikeout records he was putting up in Corpus Christi, that was just on another level. He got up to AAA, really didn't have many opportunities. They were also fighting for a title, and that's big for Mickey Story and that staff. So, it doesn't come down to those games are probably massive for development. It's more of pride and getting that reward and adding that to your resume at the same time and being a winner. So you didn't really have many opportunities to get out to AAA, but definitely going to be where he starts this year. Still very young, and I think that's going to be very big for the Astros kind of top level of the pitching department, because you look at some other guys that might be in high A and single A this year, a little bit more excited about. But among the younger guys that are up near AAA, he is definitely the leader for me.
And I think if I remember right, didn't he make his AAA debut in the PCL championship game? And I think he went 4 and third or something like that.
Ryan Gusto got scratched from that game
because he was going to pitch in Houston. Or, well, not, I think were they in Cleveland that last series? Yeah, he was going to pitch in that game, and Ulola got the spot start, AAA debut, I think, and actually pitched really well. So yeah, no, that's a really good pick, and I think a guy that a lot of people can be excited about because he's got that little bit of tweak where he stops walking as many, maybe doesn't give as many runs, and man, he can take off maybe that level we saw from even a guy like Christian Javier. So. All right, next pick, Kenny. Here we go.
In terms of saving money, I probably should have taken this guy a little bit earlier for looking at slot bonuses. But with that seventh pick, I am going to take Misael Tamarez. And that one will probably come on, as a shock to a lot of people. I've talked to a handful of people about Misael. He changed his arm slot. He switched from the bullpen Sorry, my dog's here, probably not excited about talking about
You
Misael
didn't like
Tamarez.
that pick, man.
They don't like it. They weren't happy about that pick. But switch to the bullpen, was a pretty dominant starter. Was getting like comps like Christian Javier with like the Invisa fastball and
Yeah.
how he was, what his delivery looked like, and almost was like mirroring what Christian Javier looked like back in those Corpus days. But moved to the bullpen, and I'm looking just at the August numbers: 9 2/3 out of the bullpen in August, 7 Ks. Held an opponent's batting average of 176, a 2.79 ERA. He gets to maybe a little bit less innings into September because he did pitch in some championship games there, but 5 1/3. This was regular season, 1.69 ERA, 8 Ks, only 1 walk. So you definitely saw just over time just how much better he was getting as a reliever, and that arm slot change, like I mentioned. It looks like a different pitcher out there. You can just like watch it like side by side. He looks different. I still think he's a big league arm, and I think he's a big league arm in a bullpen, in an Astros bullpen that will probably see some shuffling over time. So I don't think it's going to be ideally the same 8 that are going into this season that you'll see in May. So that's something that I don't think Misael Tamarez will be a guy that starts the season in the majors, but I think he's definitely on the radar to be a bullpen arm just with some of those changes he made and as he gets more comfortable as a reliever. And he pitched in lead on this year too, so that was very helpful for his development.
Yeah, no, that's a sneaky pick. Honestly, I wasn't expecting that one, but you bring up some great points. And like you said, you need so many freaking pitchers nowadays, and there always is going to be so much shuffling. And if he can go in, if he starts in AAA, but if he can kind of find that role in the bullpen, I don't know if they brought in a veteran closer, so I don't know who the closer is going to be in Sugarland. Last year they had Wander Suero, and he picked up 30-something saves, so maybe Samaras gets an opportunity there, but. We did leave a few on the board for me here, and I'm kind of excited about who I get to pick, but I'm really torn between 2 names. So I'm going to go with one. I'll have to shout out the other though because I feel like I can't leave them off. With the 8th pick here, it's not Mr. Irrelevant, no way at all. This is just our 8th pick. I got to go with Shea Whitcomb, and part of that is he made huge strides last year. His walk rate increased, his strikeout rate decreased, and that was coming off a season where he led minor league baseball in home runs. Like that's hard to do, right? I mean, you were at the top of the game in minor league baseball, 35 homers in 2023, and you come in and he improves the walks, cut down on the strikes, still hits for over 20 homers, steals 20-something bases, hits right around 300. Got an opportunity. I know he had a rough game at third late in the season. But I'm excited to see what he can do because, like we were talking about earlier, there's opportunities on the bench. There's opportunities at the starting positions too, but definitely on the bench. And for a guy like Shea Whitcomb, who we've seen kind of work on that versatility recently with the third, the short, the second, the left field. I don't remember if he got any time at first base or not, but they're going to need some versatility on the bench. So I'm excited to see what Shea Whitcomb can do. The other guy I wanted to say, and it's a favorite of both of ours, but Logan Van Wy, I wanted to shout him out. Talking about the relievers that we might need. And he was great last year in AAA. One of the reasons they made it so far was because of just how dominant that bullpen was. And he was a part of that. I think he struck out 90 and 70 innings, ERA under 4. And really, just like it is for any relievers, I mean, he had a lot of really good outings. Then maybe he had one where he's at 4 runs as ERA inflates. But I'm excited to see what he can do against some big league talent. So, Kenny, I know I didn't ask you to write anyone else down, and I didn't put any notes down for this last one, but I do want us to make one more pick, and I want us to choose somebody that maybe we're not necessarily excited for this spring training, but I want you to just give me somebody like low in the system that you're like, man, I'm excited to see what they can do this season. So hopefully you don't steal my pick, but I'll let you go ahead. I won't do the draft chime because we're stopping it at 8, but throw a name out there. What you got?
I think I might be stealing your guy, Jimmy. I'm going to take Joseph Sullivan. I
Okay.
think.
All right. Well, there's 3 names ahead. That was one of them. But
Okay, yeah. So Joseph Sullivan,
yeah, that's a good one.
7th round pick this past summer, lefty bat. I will tell you now, there are a lot of people excited about this guy in this system. Very pure hitter, gets on base. Likely, I mean, there's an opportunity for him to walk more than he strikes out. He got plunked like 7+ times in a very short stint in Fayetteville. His grandfather won the Heisman, so he has a very athletic background. He's a sports guy, baseball guy, football guy through and through. And I think you should be excited about what he brings to the center field position just in the minor leagues. We talked a lot about Bryce Betcher who won't be with the Astros this year, and we don't really know what the future holds for him. He's staying at Oregon for another year of football. But this guy might be even better of a defender. We'll see how Joseph Sullivan plays there, but they like the bat a lot from the left side, and I think people might be pleasantly surprised to see what they get at that spot. And
Yeah,
scouts were surprised he dropped that far in the draft and fell right into the Astros lap. So he's definitely going to be an outfielder to watch. I'm projecting, you would have to look at every single outfielder just in that 22 to 24-year-old range, maybe 21. I think he starts in high A,
I do too.
maybe a very short stint in Fayetteville if he really needs it, but he is definitely a guy that's going to be biting at the heels to play in Corpus Christi by the end of the summer.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. That's a guy that I could see having kind of a breakout year. Great makeup, good power, like you mentioned, all the ability to play center field. So, and if he starts out in Nashville, and we've seen what lefties do there, with Melton and Clifford and some of those guys, and yeah, that could be a lot of fun. So, I'll throw out another lefty and a guy that I think will also start in Asheville, Chase Jaworski. And I know we were texting about him the other day, 5th-round pick back in 23 out of high school. Just that spark plug guy, steals bases, gets hit by a crap ton of pitches, draws walks. His batting average improved every single month, April, May, June, and July, before he ended up having that injury that kind of forced him out the rest of the year. Nothing that's going to affect him this year. He actually played today in a spring training game. But he's got a really good attitude. I think he's gonna be a good clubhouse guy. Really good speed, good defensively, lefty kind of pesky hitter. He reminds me of those guys we would see maybe in the 90s and 2000s that play a little bit of second base, shortstop, swing lefty, get on base. So excited to see what he can do if he added any more power this offseason. I mean, he was young. He's 19 years old last year. So but I think that was a guy, they paid a lot of money to get him out of high school, out of Colorado. But I'm excited to see what he can do in 2025.
Yeah, I think he was dealing with like a hand injury too, which
Yeah.
is,
From a
really
slide or
sucks for,
something, I think,
yeah,
maybe.
sucks for like a development of like a shortstop and a guy who really relies on that arm. And
Yep.
yeah, he's just still so young. It feels like I think he just kind of looks a lot younger than maybe
Oh,
some
yeah.
other guys too. I'm in that category too. Can't slide on the guy too much, but he is a guy that's still sticking in top 15s. He's up there in that 45 range for future value, and 45 to 50. And I still think a lot of evaluators and a lot of people just in the system that are telling these evaluators that there's still a lot of value in him, with him being a high schooler. Like Neomar Ochoa Jr., another
Yeah.
guy who, even like scouts that met him, they're like, no way this kid is like a high schooler. He's just so developed for his age, and the numbers aren't really showing that right now. But he's shown strides as a defender and as a hitter, just like Chase has. So there are some late end teenagers, 19, 20-year-olds that are still just on the rise, and just you haven't seen the numbers just pop off the page yet from them.
Yeah, and it only takes a couple of those guys, Kenny Gomez, Ochoa, Jaworski, get a couple of those guys to perform well, early in the season, and their stock will go way up, and then we'll finally see some results from those the international signings and also some of the high school picks. But Kenny, I don't got anything else unless you do.
No, I was going to throw out Aaron Brown's name as maybe an honorable mention too.
Yeah.
I thought he pitched very well in Corpus last year. Didn't really just mirror right away when he got up to AAA. You see strikeout numbers drop like significantly from guys
Mhm.
that are coming from the Texas League to the PCL. I think it's a combination of facing major league talent, former major leaguers, guys right on the cusp, and then
Yep.
playing a little bit with ABS, and just so there's a lot of factors that goes into that. But he is a guy that first time in big league camp, really flying under the radar. I think he's another guy that could be an innings eater, like you were mentioning, Jimmy, down the line. Maybe a Brandon Belak role. I really thought Red Koba fit that well, but he's really just been hit by the injury bug and can't
Yep.
this past year. So I like Aaron Brown as a guy that can step up into an innings eating role, and maybe he is the next Brandon Belak for the Astros, which that's no slouch. The guy stuck around in the major leagues for a handful of seasons with the Astros and ended up having some pretty decent starts.
Yeah, I mean, and the Astros they've had that need for a sometimes getting start, sometimes getting long relief, and we saw with Chris Davinsky even you going even a little further back. So yeah, the Astros got a lot of depth right there with the three guys we mentioned earlier, with Aaron Brown, with Tamarez, Logan Van Wye. I know those guys are more pure relievers, but excited for the 2025 season. I'm glad me and you were back on the pod. We'll be having some interviews, bringing some players on, some coaches, but I'm excited for the season. I think the Astros system is in a better position than it has been in a little while, and I like what the Astros did. So for the 2025 season. But that's going to do it for today's episode. So if you haven't already done so, please be sure to subscribe on the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. if you can, drop us a review, leave us 5 stars, provide feedback. My DMs are open on X, on Facebook. So send me a message. Anything you want to hear, anything you want to see on the show, let us know. But as always, we appreciate you listening. We look forward to having you back for our next episode of the Astros Future Podcast, covering your Astros in the minor league system.